Welcome to the Bourbon Van. I'm Phil.
I'm Julie.
And this is the Wood Finished Bourbon Challenge.
Today's competition is all about the barrel.
That's right, let's meet our competitors.
First up, we have Woodford Reserve Double Oaked.
Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is our Old Faithful and the first bottle that made me realize that all whiskeys are not the same. It's distilled by Woodford Reserve, aged 7 years, and it spends an extra 6 to 12 months in a second barrel, which is where it develops its unique characteristics. Bottled at 90 proof, and it sells for $45.
Next up, Old Forester 1910.
Mature Old Forester enters a second barrel at 100 proof, just as it did in 1910. The second barrel is charred nearly to the point of incineration. Distilled by Old Forester under the Brown-Forman umbrella, it's aged at 2+ years, and it spends an extra 7 to 9 months in the second barrel. It's bottled at 93 proof, and it sells for $55.
Our third bottle is Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve.
Right on the bottle it says that Cooper's Craft is chiseled and charred. Chiseling grooves in the wood increases the surface area in the barrel and provides more charred oak for the whiskey to interact with. This is the budget whiskey of this group and also the highest proof. Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve is distilled by Brown-Forman, aged 4 years and possibly 4 to 6 years based on what we could find online, bottled at 100 proof, and it sells for just $30.
Our last competitor is Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel.
Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel is the highly anticipated newcomer and permanent line extension for the Elijah Craig brand. It launched nationally in September of 2020. Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel is distilled by Heaven Hill. It's aged for at least 8 years, and it spends some additional time in a toasted and charred barrel. It's bottled at 94 proof, and it sells for $50. We're going to grade aroma and palate for each of these bottles, and in the end, we're going to pick the winner that we like the best.
We're not professional tasters. This is solely based on our personal opinions. I'm ready to get started.
Me too.
Cool. Is he?
He's always ready.
Yeah.
So I poured each one of these, and they have a sticker on the bottom that identifies them. I set them on the table and Julie rearranged them, so neither of us knows what is in any of these glasses. This is a fully blind tasting. We're going to try each of these from right to left, starting with Aroma, so we'll be right back with our findings. Aroma phase complete. I think we've already gotten a lot of information on each one of these. Do you have a clear favorite?
I do. For me, number 4 is the best on the nose.
I really liked number 4 as well. I think for me, number 2 and number 3 were really good. Number 4 had the most robust aroma, but number 3 stood out to me. It was a lot of toffee and butterscotch. That's just flavors that I really like.
Thanks.
What did you like about number 4?
Really appealing. There was no alcohol, ethanol type, immediate smell to it.
I will say that one was inviting. I had to continually stop myself from drinking it while I was smelling it. I wanted to drink it really badly.
For me, number 2 and 3, they were close. Like, I'm
agree.
interested to see what number 2 and 3 are, only because they're not obviously not alike, but they're just both appealing in different ways.
So number 1 here is your clear loser for the aroma.
We wouldn't call it a loser. We would just call it the least appealing.
I would say, as much as I tend to gravitate toward higher proof, number 1 was at first all ethanol. So
Yeah,
it's
I
opened
got
up
that
a
too.
little bit, but really the only identifiable aroma in number 1 was leather for me. It was really dark, rich, but it was still mostly ethanol. So I'm thinking that one to me certainly has the hottest nose. For me, number 2 had a lot of caramel and vanilla notes to it, which I liked. And the last time I stuffed my nose in it, it was almost like a shortbread. That one I think may have the most complex palate based on the nose. Number 3 for me, with the butterscotch and toffee notes, is the one I'm most looking forward to trying.
For me, number 4 is the clear winner, and most I'm looking forward to trying.
So now that we have our aroma notes, let's get into the tasting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we find in each one of these glasses.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that was interesting and super delicious. For as subtle as the aromas were, the flavors really came through on all 4 of them, all very different, and a little bit surprising.
Yeah, all super different flavors. The nose on each of these changed from the time where we initially did our nose test to the actual tasting.
Oh, they totally opened up. Number one, which was my least favorite, in the previous category, I was getting a lot more flavors towards the end after it kind of opened up a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree on that one. For all the ethanol that was in the aroma initially, and then the first taste of that was, for me, pretty bitter, and I didn't get much out of it. I got some leather, some oak, but as subtle as it was, it struck me right from the start that this might be a nice whiskey to pair with a cigar or something, but it didn't really have its own sort of standalone flavor or any reason for it to seem super appealing. As we went from 1 to 4 and then back to 1, by the time we got back to 1, the flavors were still subtle, but there was sort of a tobacco finish and a little bit of chocolate. The oak itself is really nice on this one.
Yeah, I got a lot of oak as well. The finish was really surprising on this one. I got a lot of cherries and it lasted. It coated the tongue and it was delicious.
Yeah, it coated nicely and it lingered because of that, I think. So definitely a nice strong finish on that one. What did you think of number 2?
Number 2 was surprising. This one might win for me for the amount of flavors that I got. Peanuts, chocolate, some toasted marshmallow. I mean, it was just a more complete experience for me and super flavorful.
Yeah, really complex. And this one's funny because the first thing that I noticed about it was that it was very viscous. It was thick. You got oak right away, which you would hope to get oak from something like this. It's super sweet though, not funky in any way. And then the more I got into it, I found vanilla notes and then a little bit of marshmallow, but then when I returned to it at the end, it was just like fudge, just rich, chocolatey fudge. This was, to me, it's a dessert whiskey. Whatever it is, it's tremendous. Okay. What did you think of number 3?
Number 3 was interesting to me. I thought I was gonna like it a lot more than I did. The initial taste was almost a little bit briny. Got a lot of cinnamon. It lingered and it really coated the tongue, like all the way from the start to the finish. But when it came down to it, just not my favorite.
Number 3 for me was interesting because I think it has a great nose. Toasted marshmallow in the nose, and then when you start sipping it, you almost get a graham cracker. And so it's almost like a little bit of a s'mores experience. And then the finish is where it lost me entirely.
Yeah.
There's such a cinnamon sort of finish on this that doesn't seem to fit, and it's like hot cinnamon. It's not super pleasant cinnamon. It sort of felt like you start out on a camping trip and your friend invites you on a pontoon boat and you're floating around You're floating around a waveless lake, and just about the time you get back to the dock, somebody jumps out with a bow and flaming arrow and shoots you in the throat.
All right, we're not gonna say that on the video.
Why? I thought that's the kind of thing that we should say.
Shoot somebody through the throat. I thought you meant like cannonballs in and get you all wet or something. We're not murdering people on the show.
It's just it's a flaming arrow.
You can't say that.
Okay, so it's not like you actually take a burning arrow to the throat. I don't want to condone any sort of violence on this channel, but you get the idea. It's this lovely s'mores. Huh?
We're not keeping that in, the arrow.
You get the idea. It's this lovely s'mores that all of a sudden your throat's on fire. I think maybe it comes from rye spice, maybe it comes from barrel spice. I would guess that if that's the case, this would have to be the oldest one in the bunch, but again, we won't know that yet. This one, to me, starts great, goes very smoothly, and then tanks at the end.
Yeah, it's interesting because this one in particular was my second favorite smell. So I was really excited to taste it, but compared to the other ones, let's see where it ranks overall.
It fell off a little bit, but of course we're gonna do some more testing here. Let's talk about number 4.
So number 4 was my favorite from the initial test. This one came across really sweet for me. Lots of cherries, lots of vanilla. I got some chocolate in there. For me, this one had a complex sweetness. I don't think it was as complex of a flavor as number 2, but overall, I really enjoyed from the initial smell to the initial taste all the way through the finish. It was just a very sweet, enjoyable drink.
Yeah, this one for me is very complete. It's everything that I want in a oaked bourbon. It is sweet, it is flavorful, and as I sipped on it, the aroma got better and better. The flavors increased. I got something different every time I took another sip. And like you said, the finish is long lasting and it's lovely. For me, this one, the nose actually changed. It went from caramel to vanilla, and then the more it coated my tongue, it just became this delicious vanilla finish. For me, the strange thing about this one is that I couldn't identify the flavor on the palate until the very end. It was almost like a chocolate covered cherry minus the chocolate. You know, the gooey, sugary slurry on the inside of a chocolate covered cherry. it was that flavor, and then on the finish I got the chocolate in the end. So vanilla, chocolate covered cherries, just a little bit of oak, not overwhelming in any way. This one, very unique. I'm excited to compare it against glass 2. We're gonna do some comparisons from 1 to 3 to 2 to 4, mix these up a little bit just to make sure that we're not just tasting them in order. We want to taste each one of them side by side to get the best idea of which ones we really, really like and which ones are gonna fall off a little bit.
And we'll be back with our favorites. All right.
Well, that is the A and B testing finished, and not only are we completely on the same page, but I think we have a clear winner.
Not even sure how that's possible.
We have a clear winner, and unfortunately we also have a
clear loser.
Clear loser, yeah.
If you can call it a loser.
Yeah, there are no losers here. Everybody gets a trophy at the Bourbon Van.
Not everybody.
Okay, not everybody. But let's go through these. Let's go from worst to first.
Sure.
What finished dead last?
Sure, and I want to preface this by saying this was actually harder than I thought it was going to be, only because the more you had of each one, the more complex the flavors got, to the point where you're thinking it in terms of like, am I gonna be able to drink a whole glass of this? It was just so flavorful, so desserty on some of these.
Throughout the tasting, the more time you spent with each glass, the more you started thinking about a drinking session. Could I have an entire glass of this? Would I be satisfied? When would I enjoy this glass? Some of them turned out to be dessert bourbons. All of them, I think, would be suitable to just have a glass of, and you'd be very happy with it. This was a tough challenge.
I'll agree. I would drink all 4 of these again.
Yeah.
For me, there was a clear 4th place, and that was number 3. And it kind of surprised me because if you recall, that was my 2nd favorite on the nose. It just didn't do anything for me on the taste.
I think that this one was exactly what we thought it was when we did the tasting the first time when we started comparing them. It is so pleasant until it's all of a sudden not. The spice at the end, whatever it is, it's just too much and it throws the balance completely off.
So this is where it gets a little complicated for me. Number 1, which I thought I wouldn't like very much, surprising. And maybe it's more surprising because of its subtlety. In comparing 1 and 2, number 2 is so flavorful, and it was kind of almost refreshing that this wasn't so flavorful. Literally the last 3 on the table are amazing.
Yeah, the 3 winners were pretty obvious for us. Number 1, we think was the hottest one. We think that's probably your 100 proofer.
Yeah, even after, many, many sips, I was still getting that burn there.
Yeah, the heat is real with that one. But the thing that I would say about that is if you sat down just with that glass and just sipped it from start to finish without mixing it up with all these other flavors, I think it's a really, really nice drink, and it's very pleasant, and absolutely that's something that I would keep on the shelf all the time. That's a great drink.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4th place, 3rd place. Who's our winner?
So for me, it was almost an easy pick, only because from the initial smell to the initial taste, I definitely like things a little bit sweeter. Number 1's my winner.
I completely agree. As much as I love number 2, it's so much sweetness that number 1 provided a nice balance. It was a really well done bourbon with a well done barrel finishing, and to me this was the standout from the, like you said, the nose, the palate, and then the finish. Vanilla just kept coming back on the finish. It lasted a long time. It was a super pleasant finish. It never got bitter. For me, this super well balanced number 4 was our number 1.
Yeah, and nothing against number 2. The thing that I struggled with that is the more that I drank it, which isn't a bad thing, but the more flavors I kept getting out of it, but it almost got to be too many flavors. Like it got too sweet, too chocolatey, too fudgy. It was too desserty, really.
Yeah, number 2 I think is a fudge pop. Basically, this is dessert in a glass, and it is delicious, but it's a bit much.
It is, and it's almost why I almost swapped it with number 1 at the very end, just because it was so flavorful that it was just almost too much to drink in one sitting.
I would argue that glass 1 was probably more balanced ultimately, but the flavor profile of number 2 was more inviting. And so that's why that was a tough decision there for both of us. Ultimately, we agreed, and I think it's time to find out which glass was which.
Can't wait. So coming in at number 4, glass number 3.
Let's see. This was bottle C. Oh boy.
Oh no.
This bottle, we chased this down. It was very hard to find, and they're still speaking about this in hushed tones at liquor stores here in Oregon. It is not easy to find this bottle by us. It was just released, obviously, a couple of months ago.
So I'm gonna say I'm not surprised because we had this a couple weeks ago while camping, and maybe it was all the anticipation leading up to it, but I remember having my first glass and not really liking it all that much. So for me, not a super shocker.
You know, this bottle is so promising. The nose is incredible. As soon as it hits your palate, the sweetness comes through and you're in for a treat, and then that finish, it's just a killer. And we shouldn't be super surprised. Elijah Craig, small batch, traditionally has a little bit of that spicy back end, which I think that's a rye spice in there. So I'm not surprised by this. I actually, in tasting these, I had a feeling that was gonna happen. So for $50, this is a good bottle. Again, we didn't dislike any of these, but the balance on the finish, definitely
lacking. Yeah. So coming in third place, glass number 1.
I think based on the heat on this one, initially in the nose, and the sort of subdued, more subtle flavors, to me this is a pretty obvious Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve. But let's take a closer look, make sure. Bottle D was Craft.
And this is one that I haven't had before.
So this is a bottle that when we first bought it, the neck pour, I really wasn't that fond of, but as it's opened up, as we got down below the shoulder here, I'm getting more flavor from this when I have a full glass of it. Comparing it to these side by side is a tough task for this bottle, because remember, all of these bottles are $45 or more. This one is retailing for $30 here in Oregon, so this is a pretty remarkable finish.
Also, it did nothing for me on the smell, but that cherry really came through at the end, and I thought it was just an enjoyable drink the more that it opened up.
Yeah, it's surprising, and I do think that this is, again, I said it earlier, and I don't even really smoke cigars, but I think that this would balance out with a really flavorful cigar. I think this would hold up to it, both the proof and the extended flavor you get on that nice long finish. This is a nice bottle. So that takes us to our second place finisher.
And that was glass number 2.
Glass number 2, based on the really high level of sweetness and the complexity of flavors, I'm thinking that this is probably something that spent a lot of time in the barrel, and knowing what's on the table right now, I think that this is going to be our Woodford. Let's have a look. This is A, which is
all right,
Woodford Double Oaked. Not shocking, super sweet, and again, this is a bottle that we've been drinking whiskey for a long time, although we haven't really gotten into all of the tastings and all the complexities and trying all these different things. Woodford has been on our shelf for years. This Double Oaked is something that we've loved for a long time, and back when the only thing that we were drinking was Jim Beam, or maybe every once in a while Buffalo Trace, we discovered this bottle, and it was our gateway bottle. We do love this bottle. We don't actually drink all that much of it, and in this competition, recognizing just how complex the flavors are and how sweet it was, I'm not surprised that it finished really well.
You know what that means?
What's that mean?
My favorite bottle of 2020 wins.
This Old Forester Whiskey Row line, particularly the 1910, is something that we did just discover this year. Probably our 4th or 5th bottle of it. We love this bottle.
Love it.
So flavorful, so well balanced. Certainly not the oldest whiskey in this bunch, but the nose is incredible, the palate's incredible, the finish is incredible and long lasting.
So I couldn't be more excited that this is number 1, because I was really nervous for some reason this would come in 4th when I love it so much.
This honestly is not a surprise to me. The only surprise here to me is the Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel. It is such a highly anticipated bottle, and I'm going to rearrange these so that they're in the correct order now. And there we've got our order from start to finish now. The Cooper's Craft, based on the price alone, I didn't think it was going to fare very well. But
it almost unseated Woodford Reserve.
I think it speaks volumes that the Cooper's Craft finished as well as it did, and it almost took over Woodford. The 100 proof on it at first seemed like a detriment, but by the time we got through with our tasting and our comparisons, that higher proof seems to bring more flavor along with it and a longer lasting finish. So it really did well, and for $30 a bottle, this is a big winner. All of these bottles are good. Most of them are great, I would say that the Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel is a miss. Again, if you just sit down and have a drinking session of that particular whiskey, just that glass by itself, I don't know that the finish would be all that off-putting. I think this is a bottle that'll probably have as much room on the shelf as the rest of these three as time goes on.
And I know that people are probably going to be angry about that because this was a lot of people's favorite bottle of 2020.
It was really an anticipated bottle of 2020.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by this, not super surprised by this, but this order here was definitely something we didn't see coming.
So now that we've chosen our favorite, there's nothing left but to celebrate with the winner.
So from wherever we are
to wherever you are.
Cheers.
Cheers.